They called him Old Sam the Farmer, a harmless 75-year-old who spent his days tending corn and fixing fences. The young hunters at Millbrook Shooting Club would chuckle when they saw him shuffle in with his walking stick and weathered hands. "What's the old man gonna do, shoot scarecrows?" they'd joke. Sam Morrison never said a word. He just quietly loaded his rifle, adjusted his scope, and did something that made every single one of them fall silent. What they didn't know was that those same shaky hands had once made impossible shots in the jungles of Vietnam. And that walking stick? It hid the truth of what Sam Morrison really was. Welcome to Hidden Heroes. Before we begin this incredible story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe legends like this need to be remembered, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. The Millbrook Shooting Club sat on the outskirts of Cedar Valley, a small farming community where everybody knew everybody, or thought they did. The club had been around for 40 years, hosting monthly competitions that brought together hunters, sport shooters, and anyone who thought they knew their way around a rifle. Sam Morrison had been showing up for the past 3 years, ever since his wife Martha passed, and he needed something to fill the quiet evenings. At 75, he moved slowly, relied on a carved wooden walking stick, and wore the same faded flannel shirt and work boots to every session. His hands showed the tremor that comes with age, and he squinted through wire-rimmed glasses that had seen better days. To everyone at the club, Sam was exactly what he appeared to be: a lonely old farmer looking for company. He paid his modest membership fee, signed up for the occasional competition, and always placed somewhere in the middle of the pack. Nothing spectacular, nothing that would make anyone look twice. The younger members barely acknowledged him. Jake Hendricks, a 28-year-old construction worker who fancied himself the best shot in 3 counties, would nod politely but never actually engage in conversation. "Poor old guy probably can't see the targets clearly," Jake had mentioned to his buddies more than once. Then there was Marcus Webb, a 32-year-old police officer who had won the last 2 annual championships. Marcus treated Sam with the patronizing kindness reserved for elderly relatives at family gatherings. "How you doing today, Mr. Morrison? Take your time setting up, no rush." Even the club's younger members, guys in their early 20s who worked at the grain elevator or the auto parts store, saw Sam as harmless entertainment. They'd exchange knowing glances when he took longer than usual to load his rifle, or when his first shot of the day would miss the bullseye by inches. "Farmer Sam's having trouble with his eyes again," they'd whisper, not unkindly, but with the casual dismissal that the young have for the old. What none of them knew was that Sam Morrison had been the most feared marksman in Southeast Asia, that those shaky hands had eliminated 278 confirmed targets during 3 tours with the 5th Special Forces Group, that the walking stick he carried contained more than just carved wood. It held memories of operations that were still classified 50 years later. The monthly championship was always held on the first Saturday of the month, and this particular October morning brought a crisp autumn air that reminded Sam of morning patrols in the highlands near Da Nang. 23 shooters had registered, ranging from teenagers trying to impress their girlfriends to seasoned hunters preparing for deer season. Sam arrived early, as he always did, parking his old Chevy pickup in the same spot under the oak tree. He moved deliberately, unloading his rifle case and equipment bag with the careful movements of someone who understood the value of routine. Jake Hendricks was already at the line, zeroing his scope and talking loudly about his new rifle setup. "Custom barrel, match-grade trigger, cost me more than some people's cars," he bragged to the small crowd gathered around him. "This baby can put 5 shots in a dime at 300 yards. Marcus Webb was more subdued but equally confident, methodically preparing his gear with the precision that had made him a champion. His rifle was military surplus, an M24 similar to what Army snipers used, and he treated it with reverence. "What's the course of fire today?" asked Danny Reeves, a 24-year-old who worked at the feed store and had never placed higher than 8th in any competition. Club president Bill Kowalski, a former Marine who ran the local hardware store, consulted his clipboard. 3 distances today, gentlemen. 100 yards for warm-up, then 300, and we finish at 600. 5 shots at each distance, best 4 count for score. Perfect 600 is possible, but in 40 years, no one's ever done it. The competitors nodded, understanding the challenge. Even experienced hunters rarely shot beyond 200 yards in real-world conditions, and 600 yards required skills that most recreational shooters simply didn't possess. Sam took his position at lane 15, toward the end of the firing line. He unpacked his equipment with the same methodical approach he used for everything: rifle, ammo, spotting scope, shooting mat, and a small notebook that he consulted before each session. His rifle wasn't impressive by modern standards. A Remington 700 in .308 caliber that he'd owned for decades. No custom parts, no expensive optics, just a solid hunting rifle that looked like it had seen plenty of use. "You feeling good today, Mr. Morrison?" Marcus called from 3 lanes over, his tone friendly but slightly condescending. "We'll see," Sam replied quietly, his standard response to any direct question. The 100-yard targets went up, and Bill gave the commands that every competitive shooter knew by heart. "Shooters to the line. Load and make ready. You have unlimited time for 5 shots." The younger shooters began immediately, their shots ringing out in a steady rhythm. Jake Hendricks finished first, naturally, and was already celebrating what looked like a perfect group. Marcus took his time but finished strong, and even the teenagers managed respectable scores. Sam was still settling into his position when most others had finished. He adjusted his scope, checked his wind flags, and made notes in his little book. The other shooters watched with barely concealed impatience. "Come on, Grandpa," Danny muttered under his breath. "It's 100 yards, not rocket science." Finally, Sam chambered his first round. His rifle cracked once, a sharp report that seemed somehow different from the others. He worked his bolt smoothly, chambered a second round, and fired again. 5 shots in less than a minute, but each one deliberate, each one purposeful. When the targets were scored, Sam had a 98 out of possible 100. 2 points dropped for shots that were technically outside the bullseye, but would have killed any deer that ever lived. Good enough for 4th place, exactly where everyone expected him to be. "Not bad for an old farmer," Jake said, with a grin that wasn't entirely unkind. The 300-yard targets were a different story entirely. At this distance, factors like wind, elevation, and atmospheric pressure began to matter. The younger, cockier shooters suddenly became more serious, taking time to read conditions and adjust their equipment. Jake Hendricks started strong, but struggled with a crosswind that had picked up. His final score was a respectable 94, but he wasn't happy about it. Marcus adapted better, finishing with a 96 that put him in the lead. Several shooters dropped out of contention entirely, their scores dropping into the 80s as the distance challenged skills they didn't possess. Sam approached the 300-yard line differently than he had the 100. He spent longer reading his notebook, longer studying the wind flags. He made small adjustments to his scope, changes so subtle that most observers wouldn't have noticed them. When he fired, something had changed. His first shot was followed by a pause, then his second. Each shot was deliberate, calculated, as if he was solving a complex equation that only he could see. His target came back with a 99, losing only 1 point to a shot that nicked the edge of the X-ring. Good enough for 2nd place, and suddenly, people were paying attention. "Did you see that group?" whispered Tom Anderson, a local carpenter who had been shooting competitively for 15 years. 5 shots you could cover with a quarter. But it was the 600-yard stage that would separate the men from the boys. At this distance, most hunting rifles reached the limits of their practical accuracy. Environmental factors became critical, and the smallest mistake in technique would send a bullet inches off target. Only 12 shooters remained in serious contention when the 600-yard targets were set. The others continued shooting, but everyone understood this was now a different kind of competition. Marcus Webb, still leading overall, approached his final 5 shots with the confidence of a champion. He took his time, made his calculations, and fired a respectable 92. Combined with his earlier scores, he had a 287 out of 300, a score that had won the championship 2 years running. Jake Hendricks struggled at the longer distance. His expensive equipment couldn't compensate for technique that worked fine at shorter ranges, but fell apart when precision became paramount. He finished with an 88, good enough for a top 5 finish, but nowhere near championship level. One by one, the other competitors finished their strings. Scores ranged from the low 80s to the low 90s, with Marcus holding a commanding lead as only Sam Morrison remained on the firing line. Sam had been taking his time, longer than anyone else. He consulted his notebook repeatedly, made tiny adjustments to his scope, and studied the wind flags with an intensity that seemed almost excessive. "What's the old man doing up there?" Danny asked, loud enough for others to hear. "Probably trying to remember which end the bullets come out of," Jake replied, getting a few chuckles from the group. But Tom Anderson, who was standing behind Sam with a spotting scope, noticed something different. The old farmer's movements had changed. Gone was the hesitant, careful approach of an elderly man unsure of his abilities. In its place was a fluidity, a precision of movement that spoke of deep, ingrained skill. Sam settled behind his rifle, and suddenly, he wasn't an old farmer anymore. His breathing became controlled, rhythmic. His hold on the rifle shifted into something that could have been taught in sniper school. Even his hand tremor seemed to disappear as he found his natural point of aim. His first shot at 600 yards was perfect. Dead center X-ring. The kind of shot that experienced competitors might manage once or twice in a perfect session. His second shot was also perfect. Same hole. Or close enough that it didn't matter. The firing line had grown quiet. Conversations stopped as people began to pay attention to what was happening at lane 15. Sam's third shot was another X. His fourth was an X. As he loaded his fifth and final cartridge, you could have heard a pin drop among the other competitors. The fifth shot was also perfect. 5 shots at 600 yards, all in the X-ring, all in a group that could be covered by a silver dollar. Sam Morrison, the harmless old farmer who couldn't possibly compete with the young guns, had just fired a perfect 100 at 600 yards. Combined with his earlier scores, his total was 297 out of 300. Not just a winning score, but a club record. The silence on the firing line was complete. 22 other shooters, some with decades of experience, some with thousands of dollars in equipment, some with legitimate credentials as expert marksmen, stood in stunned silence as a 75-year-old corn farmer packed his gear with the same methodical approach he'd used all day. Finally, Marcus Webb found his voice. "Mr. Morrison, that was incredible shooting. Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Sam finished folding his shooting mat and looked up with eyes that suddenly seemed much older and much more aware than anyone had noticed before. "Long time ago," he said quietly. "Different place. But seriously," Jake Hendricks pressed, his earlier confidence replaced by genuine curiosity. "I mean, that was professional-level marksmanship. Are you former military?" Sam reached into his rifle case and pulled out a small, worn leather folder. He opened it carefully and set it on the bench where everyone could see. Inside was a faded photograph of a much younger man in jungle camouflage, holding a rifle and standing with a team of other soldiers. Below the photo were medals and certificates, their edges worn from years of handling. A silver star, a bronze star with V device, 3 purple hearts, and prominently displayed in the center was a sniper qualification badge with the number 278 engraved below it. "Staff Sergeant Samuel Morrison," he said in a voice that carried clearly down the firing line. "5th Special Forces Group, 1st SFGA, 3 tours, Vietnam, 1967 to 1973. The silence stretched even longer. Danny Reeves, who had made jokes about the old man's eyesight, stepped closer to look at the display. "What's the 278 mean?" he asked quietly. "Confirmed kills," Sam replied simply. "Long range, mostly. Different kind of shooting than this, but the principles are the same." Tom Anderson, the carpenter who had been spotting for Sam, shook his head slowly. "We've been shooting next to a legend for 3 years and never knew it." Sam carefully closed the folder and packed it away. "No legend," he said. "Just did my job. Long time ago. Different war. I came home, took up farming, lived a quiet life. Martha and I were happy with that." "Why didn't you ever tell us?" Marcus asked. "I mean, with credentials like that." Sam shouldered his rifle case and picked up his walking stick. "Because it was over. Had enough of people knowing what I was, what I'd done. Wanted to be just Sam the farmer. Still do." He started walking toward his truck, then paused and looked back at the group of young men who had spent 3 years underestimating him. "You boys shoot good," he said. "But shooting paper isn't the same as shooting when it matters. Hope you never have to learn the difference." As his old Chevy disappeared down the gravel road, the competitors began to pack their own gear in a silence that felt different from before. They had learned something about assumptions, about appearances, about the quiet heroes who walk among us without fanfare or recognition. Bill Kowalski, the club president, looked at the scoring sheet in his hand. Sam Morrison's 297 would stand as the club record, probably for years to come. But more than that, it would stand as a reminder that some of the most extraordinary people are hiding in the most ordinary places. The next month's competition came and went. Sam Morrison didn't show up, or the month after that. His membership quietly expired, and when Tom Anderson drove past the Morrison farm, he saw a "for sale" sign in the front yard. Sam had moved away, leaving behind only the memory of that perfect October afternoon when an old farmer reminded a group of young shooters that legends sometimes wear overalls and drive pickup trucks. But his shooting record remained on the clubhouse wall, a silent testament to the truth that heroes don't always look like heroes. Sometimes they look like the quiet old man who tends his corn, fixes his fences, and never mentions the 278 reasons why his hands are so steady when it matters most. Now I ask you, have you ever underestimated someone based on their appearance? Have you ever met a quiet hero hiding in plain sight? Share their story in the comments below, because at Hidden Heroes, we believe that extraordinary people are all around us, waiting for someone to recognize their quiet courage. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that heroes come in all shapes, ages, and sizes. We'll see you in the next one. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is the one nobody notices.